Hello friends, welcome back. This is full stack development video series. We were building the SmartCertify app, which is the online certification platform app. And this is episode 3, is all about the SQL basics for the beginners to understand how SQL and database works. So without delay, come let's get started. So what is SQL? SQL stands for Structured Query Language. It's the standard language for interacting with the database. That's the first thing that came into this world before the NoSQL concept came. Now, what it does is it allows you to create, read, update, delete the data that's there in the database, and that's formally known as the CRUD operation. So if you have heard about CRUD operations, they're nothing but create, read, update, delete. Now, why is this SQL important? See, it's the essential for managing the database and retrieving or manipulating the data in the applications, like our application as the SmartCertify. So that's the fundamental, that we have to deal with the data. So we need this. Okay, so then what is database? So a database is a collection of data that's organized in a structured way for easy access and management. All right. So databases are made up of the tables that can store the data in the rows and columns wise. So rows are called records, columns are called fields. So let's take a good example. Think of a database like a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, okay, where each sheet is a table. Now, if you go to the sheet, what you will see from A to Z and A to Z, from down to up and from left to right, you see that, right? So each row is an entry and each column is an attribute of that entry. For example, student name, exam score, etc. Those will be as a column name, right? So that is how you should imagine if you are new to this database. So we talked about this CRUD code operation, right? So this is how it typically looks. So if you have to select something from a table, you just need to use select star from table name. So don't worry, I will deep dive into all of these concepts in a couple of minutes. So just stay with me. Select star from. So star means like select every single column. That's what it means. Okay, so this will return all the records, and if you wanted to insert a record, basically we will use insert into, okay, the table name, and then we will specify the columns and values like that. So similarly for update, we'll be setting columns value with some data, and then we will also use some var classes so that only that specific records are updated. Delete, again same thing, we will use some var classes to specify a particular record, and we will use delete from table name that will delete a particular record or a group of record. Okay, so that's how these statements works. And let's talk about some relationships. So our SmartCertify app uses several tables, which you're going to see shortly, like users, scores, exams, and results, and so many things. So each table is related to each other. Sometimes some tables may not be related to each other, but most of the time tables are generally related to each other. So for example, a user can enroll in many courses, and each course has multiple exams, like that. Okay, so these relationships are maintained using some foreign keys and a column in one table that refers to a primary key in another table. So we will also talk about primary keys and foreign keys in a moment. So these things are the tables and relationships. So imagine this, right? If you have a user table, these are the columns, and in this user ID is called primary key because it's going to have a unique record. Similarly for course table, course ID will be the primary key, and user ID in this table might be a foreign key because user ID and another table is a primary key. Okay, we'll talk about it. And then like this, I can give you a lot of examples. These are the extra examples that you see. So I have opened the SQL Server Management Studio, that's also called SSMS. You can use this or Azure Data Studio. Both are going to be exactly same, and for this video we will use the SSMS. In upcoming videos we will translate into Azure Data Studio, so we are familiar with both the tools. Now after I open, like basically you will be seeing like this. The moment you open the server like SSMS, you'll be prompted like this to log in. You say connect, and then it connects to this local host SQL Express, and then this is what you will see. You may not see all of this database, so don't worry. All what you're going to do is click on a new query, and let's explore something. The moment you click on new query, by default a database called master is selected. So let's do this, right? Let's learn something basics. So first thing, what we need to have a database. So create database and then database name. Let's say sample, or let's say learning. Okay, I can select this. So I'm saying create database name. Imagine in a real world, when you're working in company, you will not be doing this kind of a statement. Database either will be created by somebody, or mostly 99% database do exist already as you start the project. Okay, it's very likely that you'll be doing and creating such database from the scratch. You'll not be doing it. So you should still be knowing how to do it. So create database name. I'm going to execute. Database is created. How do I know? I can come here and refresh, and you will see this database here. And then if I click here, I can come and select this database. Alright, now what else are the options? I am going to switch to a different one. I'm going to now say use learning. This is how you will pre-select the database. So I select this, Control X. Remember, select Control X will execute only the statement, not the other statement. Be careful when you have multiple statement. Just don't say Control X, everything will be executed. All right, so just be careful. Now after this, we're done. Let's clean up this. You don't need these things. Don't worry, when we do a real database design, you will have every single script given to you. Okay, so stay focus on what we learned today. Now next is a database will have tables. That's what we mentioned, right? So if I expand this, do we have tables by default? No, I do not have any man-made, human-made created tables here. Okay, so the first thing is, first let's create a table. So I can say create table name. I can give a table name called let's say user profile. And then what you have to do is you have to open this parenthesis. This is how you specify. This is syntax. Okay, so don't worry that I don't understand. See, all of these things are called syntax. Syntax is not going to change. You write, I write, syntax is not going to change. So all what you have to know and memorize, or whatever you wanted to do, right? You just need to remember this is how you have to do. Create table name. Okay, done. After that, you need to specify columns, right? We're not specifying any rows yet. We are defining columns. Data definition language. So all of these things called DDL, data definition. You're defining how the data is going to be. So the first thing is in Excel, right? You have a sheet. Now you have a columns, right? You need to define the columns to start with. So what can we start? We can say display name. I wanted to store a display name. All right. Next comes the data type. Okay, the data type is basically defines what kind of data can be stored on that column. In Excel, if you right click on a particular cell and say it's a number type, then the formats as a number. Okay, but if it is string type, it still can accept the numbers. So that's the definition of a column. So here I'm saying n varchar. Okay, n varchar means it will accept all types of characters. Okay, and then I'm saying I need to allow only 100 characters for this column, and I'm saying this column should not be a null column. I mean, someone who specifies a value, it should have some value. It cannot have a null. Now what you need to understand is this is the field name followed by data type followed by constraints. Constraints are nothing but enforcing a rule on a particular column. Okay, so we're enforcing this cannot have a null and it can have only 100 characters. All right, now we can also write some couple of columns quickly. Let's imagine we have columns like this. Okay, right, or else let's put this one. By default it is null. However, there are other columns like first name, last name, email. It cannot be null. This is a constraint, this is also a constraint. Good so far. Okay, now what we do, now the table, this is a table. Now what you need to understand is generally when you use entity framework or any table in general should have a column that can be uniquely identifiable. Okay, in this every single thing can have a duplicate. It is no guarantee that you will have a unique column here, unique value in the data. Now in order to do that, generally what is done is you can say user profile followed by ID, or you can just say ID. Both are absolutely correct. If you say just ID, automatically it will become user profile ID. That's how it works. Okay, let's define user ID. Let's name it as user ID. It's okay if it is different name. Okay, but we will be preferring table name followed by the ID. But for this table alone, it's going to be user ID. Now we are saying it is an integer column. It can have only numbers. Okay, so far it is still duplicate. I can have one or two for more than one records. How does this becomes unique? How can we enforce this as a unique? Right, there are multiple ways to do it. The easiest way to do is to have a constraint called identity. Identity of 1, 1. What does it mean? It means it's an auto increment column. It starts with 1 and there is an increment by 1. That's what this is called as. Okay, starts with 1. If I say 0, increment by 10. So the value will be like 1, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, just keeps going on. Okay, so let's keep it simple, 1, 1. So far good. So now there are important things that makes it as a primary key. See, primary key. Okay, let me tell you something. So in a table there are only two types of important index can be there. One type is called clustered index, one type is called non-clustered index. Okay, remember in interview, if someone asks you what is a primary key, primary key can have a clustered index. Okay, there's only one clustered index possible in a table. More than one non-clustered index are possible in a table. Okay, so let's not deep dive into too much into indexing and all of those stuff for the beginners. But indexing is basically imagine you have a book and you have in the first page you'll have some index, right? That's why they are called as index. So it tells you which page has what data. You can just directly go to that page if you know where it is. If you don't know where it is, you have to look for all the pages and find out. That's the primary purpose of this primary index, the cluster index. Okay, so we are going to define this column as primary key. The moment you define primary key, it cannot have a null value and it cannot have duplicate value. This is very important. Okay, primary key will always have unique value and it cannot have null value. There's another key called unique key. Okay, there's something called unique key. Okay, if the difference between unique key and primary key is unique key is same as primary, and then it can also have null values. Okay, null values means only one null. The whole table, one null is allowed because null is also a unique value. Okay, that's the difference. In interview they might ask you this. All right, we're good here, right? So primary key. Now let's imagine what happens here. Okay, so we have this primary key, we have this couple of tables. So I select this and execute. Great, let's refresh and see what happens. I will tell you important tips that you have you might not be knowing. So let me know in the comment section if you know already about the tips that I'm going to tell you now. So if you expand this table, if you expand the keys, you see this, what happened? Some mumbo jumbo random words have come here. So there's a primary key and there's a name for primary key, but unfortunately we didn't give the name. It just picked up its random name. If you don't trust me, just imagine 76 F5, right? I'm going to delete this and I'll show you what happens. I delete it. I'm going to rerun this. Refresh, expand. It's a different number. Yes, that's the point. In a real world, in an organization, you cannot or you should not have such kind of unnamed primary keys or foreign keys, because as you execute the statements in different environment, this random names will come. That's why it's not a good idea. So what is the good idea? You can actually have a name for this primary key. So here is what it's going to happen. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to bring up another table, the same table but well organized table. Okay, the table that you're going to see right now is nothing but one of the table in our database. You see this, create table, table name. This is good, this is good. We have extra columns, and here is what. Stay here, I'll come and talk about this. So you say comma constraint, we are saying constraint name, and then primary key, we are saying which is primary key. Okay, this will have a named primary key which will never ever change irrespective of how many times you execute this or wherever you execute this. Dev environment, QA environment, staging, protection, doesn't matter. Why? Because it will be easy to drop such kind of constraints if you have a named one. That's why. Now, in this, we are going to introduce one more constraint that you can define on a particular column. We are saying, hey, this is also not null, but in case user doesn't give, we will have a constraint called default. Df means default, and then we name it like this. So table name underscore column name. This is how the naming conventions are followed. Df means default underscore name of the table underscore the column name, and then we say default, and then we give a value. Okay, so let's execute this. I'm going to refresh this. Let's do this good. I'm going to expand this. See, we have a named key. Now you can drop this key nicely and the script will never ever change if you wanted to drop this particular primary key. Alright, so now we are done with the DDL, a very basic data definition language, DDL. This is called DDL. Now, how do you insert this? So there are different ways of inserting, okay? So let me give you some updates. So for example, if I right click on this table, script table as, you see this, all of these things are coming. So let's take this, insert into. It created a script for us. Basically it's saying, so it says insert into table name, and then it says we are defining in that table what columns are something that we need to pass. So we're saying these 5 columns. Did you notice user ID got disappeared here? Why? Can you guess it? Alright, let me know in the comment section. But here's the answer. User ID is the identity column which will auto increment by the SQL. So we don't need to specify this. If you try specifying it, it will give you error unless you switch it off automatically. Like unless you switch it off manually and switch it on back. Alright, so let's not do that. But the reason why that column didn't come because of that. So for good. Now here you just need to pass the value. Okay, so if you pass the value here, let's say as per the syntax, it says after that values, and then you pass 5 values. Display name smart in single quotes, and then followed by what? First name learn, and then last name coding. Let's make it fun. Alright, so I gave some 5 names, and if I execute this, 1 row got affected. What happens if you do like this? And then I'm going to remove this. Okay, execute this, 1 more row got affected. So let's take a look how it is. Okay, so select star from table name. Okay, great, everything looks good. Okay, now here's the thing. If you ever wonder, we have a constraint called default constraint, and that's a guest, right? But here guest is supposed to come if you have thought about it, but it didn't come. Why? Because we intentionally passed an empty string which is valid. Imagine this, if I clean this out, okay, and if I remove this, let's execute this 1 more time and see what happens now. 3 records, guest came, because when you don't specify, it is a null that you're passing, and if it is a null, this default constraint will kick in and it will insert guest for you. That's the beauty of the constraints. Alright, so we know constraints, we know how to create a table, we know primary key, we have seen all the data types and all those things, select statement. Alright, so the next one is update table name set. I'm saying set the display name column as Karthik. So before I execute, what will happen? If I execute this, what happens? Because there is no where class, SQL doesn't know. SQL thinks this tables, this column needs to be updated as Karthik. So all of these things will become Karthik. In order to avoid, we apply something called where class. We are restricting a record or a group of record by using where class. The moment the where class comes, we are saying where user ID equal to 2. wherever the user ID is 2, there only you update this. Update only one record, only here it got updated. If I do this, 3 records, that's what we don't want, right? But it's okay, it's learning phase. Okay, so we know what happens like this. You can apply any number of var class to filter a particular record, because in our case user id 2 is unique. I applied this, but in the real world you might apply more than one var class. You don't need to put var continuously, but you are saying var condition. Okay, and then now we are going to deal with what? Select SCR. So read operation is done, select operation is done, code operation like update is done, delete. It's all same thing, right? So delete from table name. So delete from table name. So I'm saying copy this. If I just execute this, everything gets deleted. But if I say var user ID not, or maybe if I say greater than 3, there's no greater than 3, there's 0 record affected. So if I say equal to, or I can also say in 1 and 3, leave the 2, that's what I'm saying. Okay, and 1 and 2 got deleted. You can see only second record is present. All right, okay, so we know create table. We have seen how to create a table, constraints, select, update, delete, all of those things. All right, one last thing before we end up, right? We will talk about a new table called user activity log table, where log ID is the unique column, which is identity. This is again a user ID. Okay, so imagine this, right? I have a second column called user ID, and user ID, if you're familiar with this, we talked about it. It's there as a primary key in the user profile table. Okay, and then we have other columns, and so far you're familiar. The only thing that is new here is we have the same column name. It's preferred to have the same column name. Let me put it this way. Okay, don't think that it cannot be a different name. It is, but it is not preferred to have that. So user ID is the primary column ID, the primary ID of the one of the table. So we will use that same name. And then till here everything is familiar with you. The last thing is we are also adding a constraint called foreign key. FK followed by same convention, table name followed by the user profile table. So here table name, this table name followed by the table to which this is referring to. And then we say foreign key, we specify here, this user ID is here. In this table, who is foreign key? This is foreign key. And it is references another table called user profile. In that user profile, user ID is the foreign key. For example, just for example, right? Okay, if you have like this, now you understand user ID, this one is coming from that user profile table. This is coming from here. So let's put it back. This is only for your understanding. That's it. If you execute this, now this is what a parent-child relationship. Okay, so there is only one record present in user profile table. But for a given user, many number of activities are happening. That's why child records are inserted here. We can easily pull up, we can join these two tables and pull up the final records of a particular user. So that's the importance of this primary key and the foreign key concept. Okay, so I hope you understand. All right, so let's come to this conclusion. So we learned so far about the DDL, DML. DML is nothing but manipulation language that comes under the update, delete, and all of those things. So we know what is database, why SQL Server, why this SQL. We know data types, constraints, default constraints, some primary key, foreign key, cluster index, non-cluster index, why they are required, and then some basic tables, right? So don't worry, this is just a starting, right? Feeding too much to you on one video of something that you have never seen will be too much. So we will wrap up now, and in the next video I promise you the complete database design is going to be a wonderful thing, that you will see how tables are emerging, why certain tables are having relationship with one-to-many, and why sometimes some tables doesn't have any relationship. They can stand out separately also. All right, so we're going to see all of those things in the next video, so stay tuned. If you like this, subscribe to my channel, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. Hit that like button and share this with your friends. Keep watching, and and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tech tutorials. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Happy coding!